Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight on this Monday, August 13th. Governor Rauner ramps up the rhetoric against Illinois House Speaker Mike Madigan.
Clearly he's been doing unethical things. I hope he's been doing something illegal. I hope he gets prosecuted.
Examining the rift between Chicago police and some of the communities they serve.
This church needs a fresh start.
In the community, Shauna.
A tsunami of resignations at Willow Creek Church in the wake of sexual misconduct allegations against its former star pastor.
At first, I thought that I was gonna be like the worst sailor ever because I didn't know anything else about sailing.
A sailing camp sets its sights on broadening the reach of a largely white and affluent sport. And the Motion Picture Academy announces a new award category for the Oscars, why some critics say that's a cause for concern. All that and more next on Chicago Tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brandis Friedman. A big change in Chicago violence this past weekend. Eddie Aruza has that story and more of what's making news in Chicago tonight. Eddie.
Brandis, violence on Chicago streets dropped precipitously this past weekend following the bloody toll of the previous week. Chicago police report 33 shot and wounded with no homicides this weekend. That's in contrast to the more than 70 shot and 12 killed the weekend of August 3rd to the 5th, which made it the most violent three-day span in the city in more than 2 years. Police deployed more than 600 extra officers to communities hardest hit by gun violence, with Police Superintendent Eddie Johnson saying one of the key aims this past weekend was to crack down on unauthorized street parties.
But crime is cyclical. You never know when this stuff is going to pop out. So we do what we do every weekend to keep crime down in the city. The one thing that may have been a bit different was the fact that we focus more on large street gatherings.
The superintendent added that the massive deployment of officers will continue in the city's 5 most violent district until he feels the communities are stabilized. Chicago ride-sharing fees might be a mystery to some users of Uber and Lyft, but city officials today revealed that some of those added charges are being put to use along CTA routes. Mayor Emanuel says a $38 million project to upgrade security cameras throughout the public transit system is being funded with ride-sharing fees. As part of the project, the city will add 1,000 additional cameras and upgrade another 3,800 on L platforms and around bus stops.
People have to know when they're taking the train, especially with their iPhone and other type of material, that they're safe and secure. And it's a seamless effort from whether you're on a platform or up on the street. There's security envelope around all our commuters.
Well, more than 5 years after her murder, opening statements will begin tomorrow in the trial of 2 men accused in the killing of 15-year-old Hadia Pendleton. Michael Ward is alleged to have been the gunman and Kenneth Williams the alleged driver of the getaway car after Pendleton, seen here on the left, was shot on January 29, 2013. This was while she was standing with friends in a park in the Kenwood neighborhood. Pendleton's murder came 1 week after she performed with fellow students from King College Prep at President Obama's second inauguration. Among the factors that resulted in the long delay for this trial were the alleged shooter's initial attorney quitting the case. The 2 men will be tried together but will have separate juries. In the weather tonight, mostly clear with a low around 70. Then mostly sunny skies tomorrow and a high near 88. And remember, wherever you might be in the world, at whatever time you choose, you can always watch Chicago Tonight. We stream on Facebook, via podcast, and the PBS video app. And we're always online at WTTW.com/Chicago Tonight. Now, Brandis, back to you.
Thanks, Eddie. Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan has long been a political target of Governor Bruce Rauner. But now, Rauner is ratcheting it up even another notch. Chicago Tonight's Amanda Vinicky is here with more. Amanda.
Well, Brandis, there's no doubt that Governor Rauner, who of course is a Republican, and Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan, who also is chair of the Illinois Democratic Party, are political enemies. It may have been shocking the first time Rauner called Madigan corrupt, but that was some years ago, and by now it's nothing extraordinary. Comments the governor made today, however, were out of the norm. Let's take a listen.
If the speaker's clearly he's been doing unethical things, I hope he's been doing something illegal, and I hope he gets prosecuted.
I hope he's been doing something illegal, and I hope he gets prosecuted. What does he mean by that?
You know, the governor didn't really elaborate, but he did recently bring the upcoming election into this with similar rhetoric. Madigan's daughter is Attorney General Lisa Madigan, and she is not running for re-election. Rauner supporting, of course, the Republican candidate. That's Erica Harold. She's up against Democratic State Senator Kwame Raoul for the Attorney General's position. Now, Rauner recently talked about how he wants Harold to win so she can go after Madigan and prosecute him. Today, however, the governor's comments came actually as he was reacting to reporting by the Chicago Sun-Times about a lawsuit that Speaker Madigan is facing. In 2016, Madigan beat a man named Jason Gonzalez, as well as a couple of other candidates, in his state representative primary. Gonzalez came in second, but lost by a long shot. Gonzalez is suing Madigan over it, and Madigan's attorneys want Governor Rauner to give a deposition in the case. Here's what Rauner said when asked about it.
I don't know too much about the case itself, and I don't know this particular candidate. Never spoken with him, never had interaction with him. I do know that Speaker Madigan has a pattern of putting up sham candidates in many elections, not just this one. So I hope they get to the truth of it.
And that's when the governor went on to say that he hopes that Madigan has been doing something illegal and that he hopes the speaker gets prosecuted for it.
What was Speaker Madigan's reaction?
His spokesman, Steve Brown, called the statements outrageous and said that Rauner has been going around the state on an exit interview, making what he called wild ramblings as a distraction from his own failures and ethical problems. I did also attempt to reach out to Madigan's attorneys in that Gonzalez lawsuit, but did not get a response.
And Amanda, what else do we know about that lawsuit?
Well, as I said, Gonzalez ran against Madigan in 2016. Two other individuals with Hispanic last names were also on the ballot. Gonzalez basically accuses them of being plants, props put up by Madigan to split the vote. It takes some effort to get on a ballot. You've got to collect voter signatures and such, but these candidates never campaigned or raised any money. Gonzalez's attorneys say this violated his constitutional rights by essentially rigging the election, and they say it hurt voters and the electoral process overall.
So where does the case stand now?
Well, it's nearly deposition time, and that's where things get particularly interesting. Attorneys for Madigan seem to be making the argument that Gonzalez was the plant, a Republican in disguise, propped up by folks like Rauner and his allies. They want the governor and other top Republican leaders and operatives to give depositions. But just today, Gonzalez's attorneys filed a motion to quash those depositions. Rauner is also clearly trying to separate himself from Gonzalez if you think back to those comments that we heard from him from today. It is expected Madigan will have to give a deposition. And of course, with the election coming up in November, that's precarious timing, especially because early voting begins before that. And the federal judge wants all depositions finished by September 14th.
Should be interesting, Amanda.
For sure.
Thank you. Now to Carol Marine and the question of bridging the gap between the community and the police. Carol.
Brandis, thank you. Police involved shootings, protests shutting down major roadways, a bait truck set up to catch would-be Englewood thieves. As we approach the 3-year anniversary of the Laquan McDonald shooting video's release, there remains a strong sense of distrust between Chicago police and some of the communities they serve. How does a city repair this relationship when it's compounded by persistent violence, racial tension, and a so-called code of silence, both on the streets and in police stations? Joining us to provide their perspectives are Glenn Brooks, the Chicago Police Department's Director of Public Engagement; Mike Brown, a former South Suburban police officer and the owner of a security and firearms training agency; Jedediah Brown, no relation, an activist and community organizer who's been on the front lines of recent protests; and Diane Latiker, founder of the nonprofit Kids Off the Block, which provides a safe place for at-risk youth on the South Side, and also provides learning and mentoring at her center. We thank all of you for being on Chicago Tonight. Last week, I don't know if you saw it because I know you don't watch every minute of this broadcast, I interviewed 3 African-American community activists who seemed to suggest there was an almost unbridgeable gap between Chicago police and the communities they serve. And I'd like to go just one by one with you and ask your thoughts on that. Are they right?
Absolutely not. And here's why. We will continue to deliberately work to build a bridge, to work for the public safety, to work for the safety of every neighborhood in this city, and we have. The city has gone through a number of, whether it be protests, whether it be violence, we have been making some progress. That's not to say in any way, shape, or form there's not a long way to go. But there are mechanisms in place that haven't been in place before. We have not had a consent decree before. We have not invited people to have comments on our use of force. We are looking
We are
for
yet
number
to
one.
have a consent decree formally, though, correct?
That is absolutely correct. And as a matter of fact, it's right now, it's for public comment to add their voices to it.
Okay. But you see some reason for optimism. Mr. Brown, do you?
I do, and the conversation has to be, what, if anything, can the community do as well to contribute to the high level of success rate in solving these homicides? That's a part of the problem that's not being addressed just yet. And I understand it's out of fear of retaliation or things of that nature, but having been a homicide detective myself, I can't solve a crime unless I have some type of evidence or any community participation.
Mr. Brown?
No, I'm actually going to agree with the community voices. Common sense has been calling the Chicago police for 7 years now, and they just won't answer the phone. They've not been good partners. And I don't think that this is going to change until we get a new mayor. It's not going to happen under this administration. And I believe Eddie Johnson needs to remember how he first started, because he's changing his course, and it's not getting better.
Ms. Latiker?
I believe that it has to be. We have to come together.
But do you think right now that gap is too wide apart?
Well, there's the gap there because everybody's saying it's a gap, instead of trying to fix whatever it is that's keeping us apart. First of all, the police department has a job to do. But what they should do is remember that we as a community are their partners. And more should be invested into the community so they can help with whatever the violence is doing to our communities.
And you feel it is not?
Well, they're not, because they're law enforcement. But they don't realize that the reason that they can solve murders or they can do things in our communities is because of the people that live there. And they should be respected for that.
The argument is also, if I hear Mr. Brown correctly, that the community needs to come closer to the police.
I disagree with that, and I'm going to tell you why. It's not on the community to do anything as far as law enforcement is concerned. It's on law enforcement to include the community, because it's people like myself who risk our lives, who come out of our houses to help the police in whatever's going on in our community. And we should have a voice in that.
The two things seem to have exacerbated some of the problems in the last couple of weeks. Mary Wisniewski of the Chicago Tribune just reported that bike riders, African-American bike riders, even though they're about the same percentage as Latino bike riders and white bike riders, get an undue percentage of the tickets, and the reader seemed to reinforce that, saying you could get 80 times more likely to be ticketed on the south side than in Lincoln Park. Is there profiling going on along those lines?
No, and we've met with Mary, and we met with a number of the bicycle advocacy community. One of the issues is traffic enforcement and where we do traffic enforcement. The fact is, and when we have communities experiencing levels of violence, we do increase traffic enforcement. Part of that includes bicycles. So it isn't a matter of fact that we are targeting people of color for bicycles. We're trying to do everything humanly possible to curtail the violence, and we know that there are a number of shootings that are directly tied to vehicles and bicycles. Even this weekend, we had someone who was shot that was on a bicycle, and we had the offenders were reported to us leaving on bicycles. So this isn't a matter of targeting bicycles, this is a matter of targeting violence.
Then there's the question of the bait trucks. I don't know who named them. Does anyone know who called them bait trucks initially?
That's what they're typically called throughout law enforcement circles, because that's the intent, is to put something out there that will cause people to come toward the truck that makes it
So you
enticing.
put a bunch of bicycles in a truck, you put a bunch of Nike sneakers in a truck, but for the communities that are already wrought with violence, it feels to them like entrapment, does it not? And is it not?
Well, sometimes people don't understand the definition of entrapment. Entrapment by law is pretty much enticing someone who does not already have the propensity to commit this action to do something, and then when they commit that action, then you arrest them for that. That's the definition of entrapment. However, it's just like if I were on a buy bus where I'm an undercover detective selling narcotics and someone has a propensity to already want to purchase narcotics, I'm just giving them what they already want, and so that's not entrapment. And so
does the community
the whole
hear
community should not be I'm sorry, I just do not agree. You put a truck in somewhere with sneakers in with a bunch of kids for a whole community and say that they have the propensity to steal the shoes, so you put it there so because you know they want them? Something's wrong with that picture.
And propensity is not in the definition.
Something is wrong with that
picture. It is the
picture.
act of luring a citizen into committing a crime with the intent to prosecute them. It's not speaking about their background.
Yeah, what's the end result? That's right.
That is entrapment.
That's right.
So, Mr. Brooks, going back to this feeling of an unbridgeable gap, the bait trucks and the bike arrests, have they eroded whatever trust you have begun to build in the community?
You know, this is going to be a deliberate, consistent process of reaching out to the community and, number one, giving the community the information of what we're doing and why we're doing it. You know, the fact of the matter is that we run a number of operations, whether it be vice and prostitution, whether it be narcotics, or whether it be operations concerning theft. We're looking to prevent crime. We are looking at situations where we do have a pattern. This is not something that we're going out to entice people. So I don't think it's necessarily eroding trust. It gives us the opportunity to inform the community what we're attempting to do. And a lot of times we're being asked to do something about these situations.
So, Mr. Brown, there is now the discussion of yet another protest to shut down O'Hare. Does it do that much good?
I believe that the city needs to remain uncomfortable and those major arteries and services must remain interrupted for this administration to hear or at least conversate with the voices of the community. And there's this presentation that they're saying we keep on doing this, but when you take $60 million more of police services and saturate it into a already underserved community, what you're going to see is, yeah, we're going to say crime is down, but what about the arrest that destabilizes families, and what about the oppression that was over the neighborhood, people not being able to enjoy where they live, feeling like visitors? You know, this administration is not intentionally being a partner, so these things need to be continuously shut down until they understand that they hear the voices of the people, and they're not doing it.
You agree?
To a certain extent. Well, first of all, I have to say, the police department created a program called Bridging the Divide. I love it. I love it. It brought officers together, black, white, Hispanic, and young people in my house. So I know how it worked. It was great. They are trying to bridge, and I know my relationship with the Chicago Police Department. Now, those things that are happening in between that, even a person like myself who loves what they're doing in that area can't go along with targeting our communities, cops coming through our communities, and literally bothering residents because they don't know anything about us. They're rookie cops.
So what's the solution on that?
So start putting the community at the table. And I know that might be asking for much, but to hear me sit at a table and for 10 minutes to say, could you please do this in my community because this is what's best for it, because I live there. So give communities
at the table. Who's not at the table?
You know, here's the fact, is that we have to set that table and consistently and constantly reach out to the community.
Are you doing a good enough job?
Yes.
You know, we can do a better job. And let me just be very clear about this, and the superintendent, every day, when I say every day, he's saying, how are we going to get better? So yes, we are getting better at it, but we have a long ways to go, but we are not stopping. One of the things that we're transforming into is ensuring community policing is a permanent part of it. That's a major transformation.
How do the police feel about that?
I still will say that, I do agree that the police and the community need to bridge the gap, but as a line officer, as a detective, I'm looking at it from the perspective of having to console this mother who lost her child and then having to go and follow the leads. And when I knock on a door and I ask the question, well, do you know? Other people are telling me you know, but you're not giving me that information that will help me. And so how am I supposed to bring some kind of resolution to this homicide, to bring this person to justice, but you don't want to let that person, you don't want to tell on that person because of a fear that you're going to lose your life?
So do beat officers feel there's an unbridgeable gap?
Well, I can say that there are some that they're feeling there might be a non-bridgeable gap. I can't speak for the whole of them.
Mr. Brown, this O'Hare protest, the Wrigley protest, didn't really pan out as a major protest, right? Why will O'Hare be any different?
Well, I can't speak specifically to the O'Hare protest because I'm not an organizer of that. But what I will say for this panel is we stop talking police and community and just all start talking black. When you see police officers continually pulling your residents out of their cars and spreading them out all alongside your neighborhood streets, they're not walking in the neighborhood, they're driving past, saying obscene things, and not even, if you go on the north side, you'll see greetings. When the police department, again, is investing more money into locking people up instead of building community and actually being a larger partner, you will continue to see O'Hare and the Kennedy and the Dan Ryan. People are going to call for those things. I have not called for a major shutdown yet. I just support them because I believe that they need to be done.
Mr. Brooks, are there enough black officers?
No. Number one, we are very aggressively, and as we speak this very moment, recruiting officers from every neighborhood in the city.
You agree with that, Ms. Latiker? Yes.
They are.
You do not agree?
I would not with the recruitment.
I will not allow them to
let's
do
just
that
do this
twice.
one at a time.
I won't allow them to do that twice because I worked very hard with the Chicago police to encourage more black people to apply, and they were not able to get. A lot of them haven't even gotten a response from the Chicago police after they paid their money and filled out the application. When they say recruit, they're telling people to come and fill out those applications. Those tests are designed, and the way they saturate our communities with police officers are designed so black and brown applicants don't qualify. They don't get the job.
Mr. Brown, do you agree that there aren't enough black officers?
I definitely agree that there are not enough black officers.
Do you think there's a concerted effort to keep it low?
Well, I don't know if it's a concerted effort, but I will say from the perspective of my students that come into my academy, because a few of them aspire to be police officers, there's a problem that, when you have a negative relationship within the community, that there's a repulsion, if you will, to desire to be a part of that very change that they want.
Mr. Brooks, the last word on this?
So I just want to point out, in the last year, not only have we increased our community policing effort, but we also have increased our effort to get people through this process. And that has been a huge movement forward. We are looking for new officers, and if there's anybody who wants to apply, you can go to www.chicagopolice.org and apply today.
There go common sense calling in the police department again.
So we're going to continue this discussion as we have last week and the week before and in the weeks to come. Glenn Brooks, Mike Brown, Jedediah Brown, Diane Latiker, thank you for spending this time with us. There's much more in Chicago tonight. Stay with us. And yes, that was a telephone you heard that just fired off, but we turned it off.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the City Club of Chicago.
Smart people may disagree about what makes a great city, but part of what makes Chicago great is that we don't have to agree. To run a city like ours, a lot of issues come up. The City Club of Chicago is a place to debate those issues and hear from the men and women who shape the policies, lead the industries, and tell the stories that define our city. For the free and open exchange of ideas, the City Club of Chicago.
Still to come on Chicago Tonight, we hear from two Chicagoans who survived the crash of Aeromexico Flight 2431 in Durango. A Chicago sailing camp sets its sights on broadening the reach of a largely white and affluent sport. And a new category of awards at the Oscars, what it may look like and why it's created a social media frenzy. But first, new revelations today from the Chicago Tribune that the Willow Creek megachurch based in South Barrington paid $3.25 million to settle lawsuits over child sex abuse by a church volunteer. That's the latest controversy for the church, undergoing a massive shift in leadership as waves of elders and church leaders resign in the wake of allegations against the megachurch's founder and spiritual leader. Pastor Bill Hybels has not admitted any wrongdoing, but he stepped down in April after a host of women accused him of inappropriate touching, comments, and even a long-term extramarital affair. Here to talk about the future of the troubled Willow Creek Church is Manya Brashear-Pashman, the Chicago Tribune's religion reporter who broke the story about Bill Hybels along with her colleague Jeff Cohen. Manya, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, as we just mentioned, your colleague at the Trib broke a story this afternoon that the church paid more than $3.25 million to settle lawsuits over sexual abuse of two developmentally disabled boys by a church volunteer in this instance. How much trouble is this church in?
Well, it remains to be seen. I mean, I think that the past almost 5 months have been a very turbulent time for Willow Creek, starting with the allegations that surfaced in March against Bill Hybels and were added to by allegations reported in Christianity Today magazine and then finally the New York Times. 10 women altogether have come forward and alleged that Bill Hybels acted inappropriately with them. And when I say inappropriate behavior, this is suggestive comments, extended hugs by a pastor who apparently didn't like to hug, and invitations to hotel rooms. So, the church's response has evolved in the past 5 months, and so it remains to be seen what the next stage of that evolution will be and whether they can recover from it.
Give us a little bit of background on Willow Creek Church. How big is it? It's in South Barrington, we know that much.
So it was founded by Bill Hybels 42 years ago, now going on 43 years ago, in a rented movie theater in Palatine. Just a few members, and Bill Hybels went door to door asking people why they may not go to church and developed a model to bring the unchurched to church. It grew and grew, and thousands of people now attend Willow Creek. Their main campus is in South Barrington. They have 7 satellite campuses around the Chicagoland area. Up to 25,000 members go to worship there every weekend. And then they also have the Willow Creek Association, which is a group of about 11,000 churches globally, worldwide, that are loosely affiliated with Willow Creek in that they look to Willow Creek as a model of how to do church.
And I think the New York Times reported this church is the 5th largest megachurch in the country.
It
Sizable.
is definitely one of the largest, yes, yes.
So one woman, one of the accusers, said that she had a consensual affair with Pastor Hybels, but retracted her story. What happened there?
So she had confided in a friend years ago that this extramarital affair had taken place over a long period of time, about 14 years. Those conversations went on for about a year, and the friend, who was also a former church leader, thought that it was time to take this to the elders. The elders are charged with holding the pastor accountable at the church, and she thought this was something that Bill Hybels should be held accountable for, if true. And so she took it to the elders in order for them to do an inquiry. They confronted Bill Hybels. He denied it. An elder contacted the woman. She denied it. There was some talk about email exchanges between Bill Hybels and the woman, and an elder did discover that over 1,100 emails had been exchanged between the pastor and this woman over about a 2-year time period, but they couldn't access those emails, and therefore the investigation ended. There was a second investigation that was renewed later on, and there was just never any evidence presented that proved that this affair took place, plus the woman denied it, and as did Bill Hybels. So there was no need, the elders believed, to continue pushing this. But the former church leaders who were kind of gathering or growing in number with concerns, they disagreed and they continued to push.
So how did more allegations begin to come out then?
So the conversations continued. They started contacting other former church leaders, some of them women, because Willow Creek is known for being a progressive evangelical church that allows women to preach, empowers women to be teaching pastors and leaders. And so some of these leaders said, wait a minute, I had an awkward hug 10 years ago. Wait a minute. I had that moment when he invited me to stay a few extra days in Spain. That was one of the allegations by former teaching pastor Nancy Beach. Prominent, reputable women who had stories to share, and everybody started to recognize patterns in the stories that they were sharing. And so they pushed and pushed the elders over a 4-year time period, and then they finally, when they got nowhere, decided to come to the Tribune.
Hybels vigorously denied these accusations. At first, the church defended him and didn't believe the women. What changed?
That's a good question. It really has been an evolving response over this nearly 5-month period of time since the story broke in March. Indeed, Bill Hybels called some of the allegations flat-out lies. The elders defended them, so did the co-pastors. And then when Bill Hybels resigned or stepped down early, 6 months before he was supposed to retire, to get out of the way of the ministry, then the elders came forward and kind of offered a limited apology for maybe not all of the allegations were lies. Fast forward to early July, Steve Carter, the teaching pastor who had been named as one of Bill Hybels' successors, he posted a public apology on his personal blog, and that prompted Heather Larson, the lead pastor, to step up into the pulpit the next night and give her own apology, and the elders to release a written statement. And then fast forward again to last week, and the allegation was reported, the most severe allegation was reported in the New York Times, and that prompted Steve Carter to immediately announce his resignation, which little did we know he had tendered weeks before, but the elders had asked him to stay. And then on Wednesday, Heather Larson and the entire elder team announced that they were stepping down.
Hybels himself, he stepped down in the spring, but he still denies everything.
As far as we know, we haven't really heard much from Bill Hybels since he stepped down, and I believe the New York Times got a statement from him denying the most severe allegation, but that's the most recent we've heard from him. He has not offered comment or circled back to do anything. I should say when he stepped down, he did offer apologies for perhaps not listening and for reacting as defensively as he did when the allegations first surfaced, but that was the last that we've heard.
Hybels founded this church. Like, can they survive without him? And or after this latest revelation, are thousands of worshipers going to start leaving the church? Or Willow Creek Church specifically?
You know, that remains to be seen. There's a lot of faith in that ministry. It is a powerful ministry. Willow Creek does a lot of wonderful things for the community and around the globe. And the members realize that. And that's what makes this so sad, is this leader that has led them down this wonderful path and transformed thousands of lives might have had this dark side to him that they didn't know about, and they trusted him, and he let them down as far as they know. And so I think that it really remains to be seen. There's a lot of optimism about the interim pastor who has stepped in to guide them. There's a council being drawn together of outside Christian leaders to help them navigate this tumultuous time, and I think there's a lot of optimism there. But, you know, typically when people are unhappy with their church, they withhold their tithes, their contributions from the collection plate. Maybe they stop going, and maybe they start church shopping. So it really remains to be seen what road the Willow members will take.
Okay, Manya Brashear-Pashman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And up next, walking away from a plane crash. 2 survivors share their story. Oh, look at that pink. Not many people get to walk away from a plane crash, but 2 weeks ago, Reverend Ezekiel Sanchez and Dorelia Rivera did just that. They were 2 of the 103 people, many from the Chicago area, who survived the crash of Aeromexico Flight 2431 as it attempted to take off from Durango for Mexico City in severe weather. Yesterday, Reverend Sanchez held a massive Thanksgiving to celebrate the survival of everyone on board. Here now to talk about that life-altering experience are Reverend Ezekiel Sanchez, priest at the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe Church in Des Plaines, and Dorelia Rivera, who attends the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe Church and who was part of the group helping Father Sanchez celebrate his 50th birthday. And we were talking, I would like to know exactly when was your 50th birthday, Father?
Well, if I was saying that on camera, it's the 28th of July. And I was on my way home on the 31st trying to come back to the shrine. So that's when the event happened. So I made it a couple of days after 50, but at least I made it to the 50.
And more than that now. So
yeah.
How did both of you come to be on this flight?
Well, Dorelia and her family and I are from the same hometown in Mexico. The name of it is called La Purísima in Durango. And this year happened to coincide a couple of celebrations. One was her daughter's 15th anniversary, birthday that is, which we call it a quinceañera. And I was honored to be invited to kind of share in that. and also to celebrate my 50th birthday. So we made it kind of a nice, it was a wonderful time for a lot of people in that hometown, and a lot of folks from Chicago came. So some of the folks that were on the plane with us were part of that celebration.
From the video that people have posted and from what people have said, that it sounds like the weather was not very good, like at the moment of takeoff. Dorelia, describe what that was like, please.
The weather was not optimal in my view. I travel quite frequently for work, at least 4, sometimes 6 times a week. And as we were taking off, I literally turned to my daughter and I said, you know, it's okay, we're going to miss our flight. I just assumed as we were taking off that we were actually going back to the gate, just because it was hailing pretty much sideways, and the storm was, you couldn't see 5 feet outside the window. So it was a lot of hail and rain and storm as we were taking off. So I honestly did not think we were going to take off. I thought we were going back to the gate, and I said that to my daughter.
So what was it like on the plane then? Obviously, when, I'm sure it happened very fast, but when the event happened, what was that like?
Well, it happened really fast. So as I was sitting right in row 5, so it was right behind first class, and it was a bulkhead. And the bulkhead, we really can't have any bags or anything with us. But my daughter just turned to me and said, okay, I guess we're taking off. I said, okay, I guess we're taking off. And probably within I would say 30 seconds of me saying that, we literally did a sign of the cross, as we always do, and it just started shaking violently. We heard a loud noise behind us, several rows behind us. We didn't see what it was, but as I was trying to protect her from hitting the top of the luggage compartment, I kept looking to see if the door was opening or if the flight attendant was going to say something. I didn't hear an announcement. I didn't hear anything. I looked back and I saw flames and smoke in row 7. Pretty much, it was 7 or 8. So as soon as that happened, it was just shaking violently. We went down and then we jumped, it seemed, a couple times up and down. And as we
looked like we might be going back to the gate, but when we heard the turbines go to full max, I said, I guess we're going. That must be a lot of confidence in the pilot to say we can get off. But then we got into a whiteout condition, and so with hail and other things there, it seems to have been a microburst that affected the plane, and once it hit, I knew it wasn't good. It wasn't good. So we don't know I didn't feel how high we were in terms of the takeoff. I didn't know how fast we were. I just began to, well, clearly, like everyone on the plane, started saying our prayers, and we had no idea whether or not we would come out of it. The one thing I do remember, once we were bouncing, because it seems like the plane was forced back onto the ground. Once I felt us bouncing, we were doing okay. The one other concern I had at the time was, please God, please don't let us roll. I don't pray to God that the plane doesn't roll, because if the plane rolls, then it's full of fuel, and that would have been a very different story for us. So there was a lot of factors there that kind of, you know, part of me was like, well, I guess this is it. And Lord, have mercy on all of us and help us go home well.
Was there a point in all of this where either of you thought you were going to die here?
Oh, absolutely.
Immediately.
Immediately. Everyone had that. You can't have a plane crash and I think we're going to get out okay. Everyone, at least, anyway. I think once the plane stopped, you kind of let that go and get out. Just get out, get out, get out. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people got out. I saw Dorelia and her daughter as soon as they came out. I was up in the front rows. And like so many other passengers, just helping get out. One of the things, factors that helped, I think, the passengers get out a little more quickly is that the down.
It was quite chaotic. All the luggage had fallen into the middle aisles, and so people were trying to jump over the seats. Some moms, I could hear them telling the passengers, "Take my child," in Spanish, "Just take them out with you." And I was trying, actually, when I went to get my daughter a couple of times, we were actually pulled back a couple of times by a couple of passengers. And finally, I just held on to her, and I honestly thought I broke her arm. That's how hard I hung on to her. I said, "I'm not leaving you on this plane." And we ran out, and the first person I saw was actually Father Sequiel. I said, "Father, let's go, are we going?" He's like, "You go, take these people with you." And we went in the direction he kind of pointed, we ran, and we gathered as many people as we could, and the area was these thorn bushes. That's the best way I could describe them. And so it was all thorn bushes everywhere, and like a desert. And so we grabbed as many people we could. We were grabbing kids' hands and other passengers' hands we didn't know, helping them over bushes, helping them over mud banks, and we ran to a road we found in the just a little bit outside of where we had crashed, and we just went as far as we could. I didn't let my daughter look back. I held on to her and I said, you know, please just don't look back. She's like, Mom, I just want to look at it. Don't look back. Just don't look back.
And I'm sure this was a life-changing experience. How would you describe how your life has been changed by this?
I think I'm still in the process of discerning that. I know it's been changed. I know we are here to serve. I know this is going to lead us to greater things. And I'm still myself in the process of discerning that. You know, I was telling somebody today, I'm in the process of just, you know, at times it does seem like a bad nightmare. And I think about it. I said, how? And I look at the pictures and I look at the footage. I'm like, how did we even survive that? So I know I've been changed as a person. I know my daughter has too. I know we have a greater purpose that we're still going to reach out to find, to see what that is. But I'm still discerning that as well as my daughter.
And Father?
Well, you know, the overwhelming amount of support from family and friends and from your parishioners as well, just as we celebrated yesterday, a beautiful Mass, so many people came and just poured love upon us and talking how much they would have missed me, or thank God we're here. I kept thinking, I said, normally you would hear that stuff at a eulogy. I was like, thank God I'm hearing it on this side of the world rather than on the other side. So I think for me it's a little different, primarily because I think I deal with people who are dealing with death and dying issues all the time. But for me, getting close to it, it demands I reflect deeper into, as I mentioned at Mass, and when you get that close to the edge, you have to ask, will you look over and see what's next? And that's ultimately the theological question. If I died, where would I go? What would happen? Which is the question everyone will have. And so I pray to God that I can dig deep a little bit and hopefully bring consolation to people, whether it's passengers who were with me or people going through a hard time in ministry.
Okay. Our thanks to Reverend Ezekiel Sanchez and Doreli Rivera for joining us.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
And we're glad you're safe. We're back with more right after this.
Don't miss a Chicago Tonight story. Get them all delivered to your desktop or mobile device with a subscription to our morning newsletter. Go to WTTW.com/Chicago Tonight email and sign up.
Chicago's lakefront offers great opportunities for sailing, whether you're just offshore or racing to Mackinac Island. But recreational and competitive sailors have, in general, tended to be white and affluent. That's changing in Chicago, which, as we are told, has the largest community of African-American sailors in the country. This summer, a local sailing camp has tried to break down economic barriers with a scholarship program for a majority of its campers. Jay Shevsky has the story.
It's the last day of sailing camp at the Jackson Park Yacht Club on the South Lakefront. This isn't the only sailing camp in the city, but it's one of the most diverse. Karen Harris is the yacht club's commodore.
We used to have a junior sailing program for many, many years, and then it went defunct in the 1980s. And so I really wanted to make sure that we brought it back to life for a couple of reasons.
For one thing, the sport needs new sailors. But she says they also want to broaden the reach of a sport that is generally white and affluent.
This year we were able to offer our Open Horizon sailing program, which is our scholarship program. So kids who can't afford sailing lessons can take sailing lessons for free.
And what do we call this point of sail when the wind is coming straight across the beam of the boat?
Of the 132 kids in camp this summer, nearly 2/3 were on full scholarship. Johnny Mercer is the camp director.
A lot of the kids that we get have absolutely no contact with the lake at all. They've never seen the lake, they've never been in the lake. Even just getting them in the water for the swim tests on the first day is really difficult.
Kids that we're targeting are specifically from the south side of Chicago, the west side of Chicago.
All right, you're sailing.
The kids themselves don't know who's on scholarship or who's not on scholarship, nor do the instructors.
Al Thompson has been sailing out of Jackson Park Harbor since the 70s.
Well, I like to expose them to the knots. There's like 150 knots, and you don't need them. You need a half hitch, an 8, and a bowline. And you can tie up anything for the rest of your life.
By the end of that 2-week period, they can name the parts of a boat, they can set up a boat, they can sail a boat, they can take it apart.
At first, I thought that I was gonna be like the worst sailor ever because I didn't know anything else about sailing. But then when I got onto the water, it was actually pretty fun and relaxing to me.
The main skills they need to know is they need to understand the wind and how the wind powers a boat, basically.
Sailors call it points of sail.
Points of sail is based on the direction you're going and where the wind is coming from. And in certain directions of the wind, there's certain ways that you have to have your sails. And if you're pointing straight into the wind, you can't go anywhere.
Sailing is a thinking man's sport. In order to get a boat to move in the water, you have to have a concept of where the wind is blowing, your relationship to the wind in the boat, how to steer it. You're problem solving all the time.
There are also safety drills. The man overboard is really a spare life vest, which the sailors must rescue by circling back quickly. But on a hot day, everyone's favorite is the capsize drill.
We're capsizing. Over here. Yeah. Yay! Keep going, keep going. Keep going. I'm trying to jump.
The capsizing is when the boat tilts to its side, and sometimes people don't want that to happen, and some people like when it happens.
Yeah, I got it! Okay.
We do the capsize drill because in case in an emergency, if the capsize drill actually happens, we know how to actually get the boat up.
What we have to kind of show them is that being a good sailor is about dealing with those circumstances, you know, working out what to do when things go wrong, and giving them kind of independence over the safety and some ownership over the safety. So it's not just us as adults saving them, but we're taking them from being kind of students and kids to actually being kind of sailors, you know.
Aside from learning the skills of sailing, Johnny Mercer says sailing teaches teamwork and respect for nature.
If they respect Mother Nature and they respect what the lake can do to them, then they respect us. Because they know that we're the people that can actually give them the skills in order to be out there in the lake. Because if a kid isn't respectful, and you know, we get some cocky kids, soon enough, Lake Michigan is going to teach them a lesson before we have to, you know.
They also want these kids and everyone to know that you don't have to be wealthy to enjoy sailing.
There's still the misperception that sailing is a very expensive sport, that you have to own a boat to be a member of a yacht club. A lot of people don't think of sailing as something that they could try.
She says dues are much lower if you don't own a boat, and then you have lots of opportunities to sail on other people's boats. Or at the very least, it can provide a fun way to stay cool in the summer. For Chicago Tonight, this is Jay Shefsky.
The Jackson Park Yacht Club's junior sailing program is for ages 8 to 18, and today is the first day of the camp's final 2-week session. You can find out more about that on our website. Change is coming to the Oscars again, and some are not happy about it. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences says it will cap the awards ceremony at 3 hours. More controversial than that, there'll be a new category, an awards for achievement in popular film. Critics have taken to social media to voice their questions. What will a shorter ceremony look like? And what kinds of films will be presented in this new category? Joining us to talk about the changes and the reaction to them is Allison Shoemaker. She's a film critic for the online magazine Consequence of Sound. Welcome back to Chicago Tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Seems like the Oscars just can't catch a break, right? There was Oscars So White, there was Me Too earlier this year. What's going on?
Well, I mean, the world is changing and Hollywood is changing and lots of industries are changing, performing arts and otherwise. And because the Oscars are so visible, because they're such a huge part of the way that we understand film, they tend to be a focal point. So when we say something like Oscars So White, obviously that's specifically talking about the Oscars, but is also shining a light more broadly on a problem within the industry.
Why cap the ceremony at 3 hours?
Because broadcast TV ratings are going down. It's a famously long ceremony, but the Super Bowl is a famously long football game, and yet people still tune in. That said, the Super Bowl's ratings were also down this year. Both of these changes actually seem like a reaction to trying to get more people to watch the Oscars live.
So what could a shorter ceremony look like?
Well, sadly, it's probably going to mean that a bunch of the smaller categories, in the sense of their popularity, visibility, will be actually taking place during commercials. So things like Best Cinematographer, Best Costume Design, Best Sound Mixing would be awarded between the other awards when the cameras are not running. Those, they're saying, will be shown in montage. Those acceptance speeches will still be shown throughout the night. But for people who really love those, like I do, it's kind of a bummer.
And so a new category was also announced designed around achievement in popular film. Why add this new category?
This is another, hey, please watch us move, at least it seems from the outside. We don't really know all that much because the Academy said very little in their announcement, has said very little since. But it seems to be a reaction to the idea that the Oscars are awarding elite films, films that maybe not a ton of people are seeing. Last year's winner, The Shape of Water, which is a really lovely film, but isn't for everybody, wasn't exactly a blockbuster. So it seems to be a move to reward films like Black Panther, Wonder Woman, superhero films, but other big budget films. Mission Impossible Fallout would be a likely contender for that category in hopes that that would draw people back to their TV screens.
And as you mentioned, you know, the Academy made the announcement by tweet and offered very few public details. Why do it that way? Why do that?
You know, it's hard to say. It's a little baffling. My guess, and it's only a guess, I'm not an expert on the Academy and I'm obviously not a member, is that they wanted to give themselves some wiggle room so that if there's a bad reaction, as there has been, the reaction has been largely very negative, they have a chance to say, oh, well, we're going to cap it at $125 million. They've already said, oh, these awards, someone who's not, a film that's nominated for Best Popular Film will still be eligible for Best Picture, which is also the case with animated films, documentaries, things like that.
Is this a good idea for the Academy?
You know, it's a good idea in spirit if you're being really generous about the motivation. It seems to me pretty transparently a move to boost ratings. But if you think of it in terms of a ploy designed to remove some of the stigma from, say, comic book movies. Black Panther, a huge box office success, made $700 million domestically. Also a big critical success, one of the best reviewed movies of the year. That should be eligible for an Oscar. It should be something that's a Best Picture contender, and it probably would or will be. But with the creation of this category, it's likely that Black Panther would get a Best Popular Oscar nomination, and that means it may be less likely to get a Best Picture nomination, even though it's definitely worthy of that consideration.
What are some of the criticisms that you're hearing about this?
That's one of the big ones, that if we, for example, nominate all the big budget movies, the blockbusters, the very popular films in that category, is it then going to make it less likely to get a Best Picture nomination? It also sort of stigmatizes the idea of a popular film. Well, here's your honorary Oscar, in a sense, while the real movies, quote unquote, get the traditional statue. So we'll see. It's definitely an interesting idea. We'll see if it sticks around.
I would imagine there's also some concern or criticism about some of those categories that are being moved into the commercials and not being, you know, broadcast with the rest of the show, that they're being kind of relegated to less important categories.
Yeah, one of the great things about the Academy Awards is that it gives people who maybe their entire familiarity with film is they just go to the movies every once in a while. It is removing an aspect of the ceremony that shines a light on part of what makes movies so amazing. A great film has to have a really good cinematographer. Some of the best films of the last 10 years have had incredible cinematography. And it's a shame that the average viewer won't be reminded of those contributions in a very visible way.
Now, Disney, ABC, they have the contract for the award show through 2028, and some people have said that this is all being done to benefit Disney ABC TV Group because they own Marvel Studios and the Star Wars franchise. Any basis to that criticism?
It's hard to say. It definitely seems likely to benefit ABC. Reportedly, this is all pressure from ABC. They want the Oscars to be a huge TV night. They want those ratings. They want those ad sales. Whether or not it benefits Marvel films, the Star Wars films, remains to be seen. Obviously, Black Panther is the exception and not the rule in terms of a big budget, high grossing film that's also critically acclaimed in a way that it could still get a Best Picture nomination. But it certainly makes it more likely that things like Infinity War, which received positive to mixed reviews, would end up in that popular category.
And we're almost out of time, but haven't some films like Titanic, Lord of the Rings, they've been both Best Picture winners and popular films. Can't you be both?
Oh, absolutely. And there are some very high budget films films that made a lot of money like Avatar that were not particularly well received and yet got Best Picture nominations. This is also the second time that they've made a reaction like this. In 2010, they upped the number of nominees from 5 to 10. That then changed to 5 to up to 10, largely in hopes of getting in more nominees like Get Out, which was nominated in the last year. Very popular, but also deserving.
Okay, film critic Allison Shoemaker, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And you can take a poll on our website to tell us what you think about the changes to the Oscars. So that's our show for this Monday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily e-alert and join us tomorrow night live at 7. A local steel company is riding the tariff wave and celebrating much-loved meteorologist Tom Skilling's 40th anniversary. Now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices. Bob Clifford is on the board of overseers of the Rand Institute for Civil Justice, a think tank in California.